Welcome back to another episode of the Brew and Ink podcast. This is season 3. All right, welcome faithful listeners back to another Brew and Ink episode. This is episode 6 of season 3 and the wrap up of our story, The Midnight Showing. So if you have not listened to any of this story yet, stop, go back, listen from the first episode, and then you can get caught up. But right now, I'm going to introduce everyone at the table. You've got myself, Stephen, SM Freehand, and to my right, we have Britt Mooney, MB Mooney.
What's up?
And then we have Evie Porter of the Evie Porter tribe. So we are excited to be with you guys tonight to wrap up the story. But first, we have a topic. We want to talk to you guys about music. And you might say, wait, I thought this was like a writing podcast, so why are we talking about music? Well, I don't know about you, but music is very involved in my reading and my writing routine. Personally, growing up, I would read a lot on road trips, and I had a younger brother and a younger sister, and I had two parents that, wanted to have conversations during the road trip. So I would always bring headphones, and back then it was a CD player, a Walkman,
Sure.
Yeah. And I would listen to music while reading my stories. That way I could drown out everything else, and I could focus and concentrate. And so that just kind of became habitual for me, kind of a thing that I liked, because when I would hear the soundtracks or the albums that I would listen to, it would spark for me memories of parts of the book that I read while listening to that album. And so then it became something that I did while I wrote. And for the same reason, to really drown out the world, get my headspace in a certain area, let the music kind of drive the emotions a bit. And so I listen to a lot of soundtrack music and a lot of curated playlists. If I know I'm going to be writing a certain thing, I usually do it for a book. Like I'll create a playlist for the book, and I'll listen to that every time I'm writing that book. And then there's other times where I just have a playlist that's for certain upbeat, I'm like, okay, there's going to be high intensity. I should listen to this playlist because that'll get me in the right headspace. But I definitely have different playlists for every book style that I'm working. So like my fantasy stories obviously have a lot of Lord of the Rings music on there. A lot of those types of movie scores and sound. Whereas my sci-fi book has a lot of Tron soundtrack, Daft Punk, Stranger Things. I love that soundtrack for writing, especially when you're trying to write something kind of like sci-fi and spooky. That's one of my go-tos for my sci-fi book. But so that's what we're talking about. We're asking you guys, our listeners, do you use music when you're writing? Do you use music? Do you listen to music when you're reading? What's your relationship with music, and how do you use it as a tool for your writing?
Yeah, for me, it's actually extremely important because I'll listen to a specific song to get me to that point so I can get into the story.
It is like a trigger even for yourself. Like you're like, oh, okay, I'm in the zone.
Exactly.
I do that a lot too. Like if I'm at a restaurant or something or somewhere where I don't want to be disturbed or asked questions.
I will say this: if you have noise-canceling headphones, make sure that your family knows that you can't hear them coming behind you.
And speaking of music, what have you found yourself doing?
Yeah, so for me, when we deal with music, I'm a musician, and man, I love music. And for me, like you guys have already talked about, a lot of it has to do with just getting me in the right mood, getting me in the right frame of mind. I'm a busy guy like you guys are, and I just need something sometimes to put me in the right mood for that scene. And
a little extra trigger.
I'm more of an emotional music guy. Like I put some playlists together and iTunes and stuff like that so that I can have certain kind of emotions and things like that ready to go. For me, it's about battle scenes. I do progressive metal and like really kind of aggressive rock and that sort of thing for battle scenes. And I have, some like spooky, creepy stuff for, those kind of scenes, and, really kind of emotional, slower music for maybe some of those down scenes, those in-between scenes between kind of action. And of course, I got the romantic stuff, I got that sort of stuff. So yeah, so for me, it's a combination of everything. I like a lot of different styles of music. And so for me, it's really about just getting me in the right headspace. And I don't need to like have music the whole time, but I definitely like to have it as I go into writing a scene, because like I said, I'm just so busy. I don't have time to sit there and just take the time to get in the right mood. I need some help with some coffee and some stuff like that. So that's definitely a big part of it.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned kind of the types of music you have, and I definitely do a lot without lyrics. Because you mentioned, Evie, also like sometimes you don't want to be pulled out.
Right.
But you talked about doing like heavy metal. I definitely have Rush, one of mine. That's good. I like that. And you'd also, it's just interesting how we each use the tool, but in a different way. So, what about one song recommendation or album? If you had an album or a song you could recommend, I'm going to say Pirates of the Caribbean, Stranger Tide, because it has like almost two separate sections to it. The first half is like straightforward soundtrack style. It's got a lot of like a Spanish guitar influence to it, so it's got some really cool beats in there. But then like about track 13, it switches over, and like the last 6 tracks are all DJ dance like remixes of the previous songs. So it's still like the theme and the overtures and stuff like that, but now it's like got this driving beat behind it, and it's a little faster, sped up, and then it kind of like all morphs together. So you kind of have 2 different styles. If you want to listen to something that's more laid back, orchestral, you can get that, or you can like really get into like those driving, like, oh, this is a good action scene. I listen to that soundtrack all the time.
Yeah.
Britt?
Yeah, so for me, when you're talking about what's one thing, I'm probably going to have to give 2, breaking the rules a little bit. I'm sorry. As far as what I would tell people to kind of listen to, there's a couple things I like to talk about. One of them is Alter Bridge. Alter Bridge's album, it's called Blackbird, and it's from like 2007. And it is just an amazing album. The aggression is great for like battle and that sort of stuff. And then when you're dealing with really kind of emotive, epic songs, there's really some really great songs that go along with that, and his voice and songwriting. A lot of it is just, it's such a great album. It really inspires me in a lot of ways, just kind of emotionally as we get into things. And then the other one I wanted to talk about was Last of the Mohicans. That soundtrack, the score of that, and I don't even remember who the composer was, but the score from that soundtrack is so amazing. You can just use that for so many different kind of things, different kinds of scenes. It just really works. And I know, people really like and would recognize, and I like it too, right? John Williams and Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Hans Zimmer and some of those guys. But again, that soundtrack for Last of the Mohicans is such an amazing score that I just think it works with a lot of different kind of things, especially the epic fantasy and stuff that I like to write with that. So those would be my 2.
Hans Zimmer, I love him, I think, more than John Williams now. It's close for me, but he does so many different movies that you love and you remember. Another good one is Game of Thrones. They've got good stuff for fantasy and war kind of stuff.
King Arthur is also an amazing playlist.
I have not listened to that one.
Do you hear the people sing from Les Mis?
Yes.
All hyped up from that song. So that's the one song that can, like I said, pull me anywhere.
So there you go. There's some recommendations for you guys, our faithful listeners. Add those to your playlist. But for now, what we have put together for you is the end to our story, The Midnight Showing. And I just want to say tonight's Random Ramblings have been brought to you by Founders Brewing Company, the nice chocolate oatmeal breakfast stout. It's delicious. Without further ado, then, we will jump into the story.
want to say thanks for listening to our podcast. If you are interested in learning more about writing and how to become a writer, check out our syndication page, seriouswriter.com. They have articles, resources, classes, videos, and a podcast, the Brew and Ink Podcast. Again, check out seriouswriter.com. Thanks for listening.
Midnight Showing, Part 6. After the last interview with Mr. Sheldon, or whatever his name was, I excused the comedian and gestured to Dr. Winsek and Mr. Gorgon. Gorgon rose from his seat a few tables away and walked over. The doctor was standing over a couple crewmen that were zipping up the body bag and cleaning up the remains of the blood and vomit. The crewmen carried out the dead man, and Dr. Winsek came my way. They reached me almost at the same time, Gorgon slightly ahead. I stood from the table where I conducted the interviews and backed further into the corner of the room, placing more distance between us and the shocked and grieving crowd. Gorgon and the doctor moved around the table to stand with me. "So, Mr. Wolf," Gorgon said, "what do you think?" I sniffed at him. "It's Dr. Wolf, and I think a great many things." Gorgon blinked. I opened my pad of notes. The interviews revealed some enlightening information, to be sure. Dr. Winsek squinted at me. "Any clues as to who killed that man?" "Yes," I said, "plenty of clues." "You leaning toward any of them in particular?" Gorgon asked. As quasi-head of security, I could see the fear in his eyes, behind his forced calm, at the thought of putting someone in a locked room for the remaining duration of the cruise. "Mr. Gorgon," I said, "I know who the murderer is." Dr. Winsek kept giving me that look, a skeptical one. "After one interview each, you know who did it?" "Oh, it's obvious and simple," I said. Gorgon swallowed hard. "Who?" I raised a finger. "In just a moment, Mr. Gorgon. Allow me to go over my notes with you. Indulge me, if you will. First, I am a professor by trade, so this will be quite a learning moment for the both of you. Second, if you are to take any action, I wish for you to hear the evidence I attained prior to that." "Okay," Dr. Winsek said. I consulted my notes. Personal interviews are always the best method of obtaining information. Modern police methods place less and less importance on eyewitness testimony and more on the physical hard evidence like DNA and the like. It is understandable. People lie. They deceive. They misremember details. But when you know people, know how to read them, then their lies and inconsistencies tell you more than the truth ever could. Take my first interview, Henri Cousteau. Obvious fake accent, bad with money, worse with women. He accused Tabitha, since she and Blake have some level of relationship, and would have been angered by Mr. Betts's heckling. He defended Abigail Goldstein since he felt she had no motive. Next came Tabitha, a seemingly vapid and ridiculous person, but she is more insightful than one might realize at first glance. She accused Abigail out of apparent jealousy, but she might have picked up on some motive there, as Abigail is educated in disciplines that would give her access to substances that would cause such a reaction in Mr. Betts. Of course, she defended Blake, but as I said, much of her appearance and demeanor is designed to distract from her true nature. "So Tabitha did it," Gorgon said. "Just a moment," I said. Abigail's interview revealed even more, that Blake's relationship with both Mr. Betts and Mr. Cousteau would have given him opportunity and motive. Comedians truly hate hecklers. But she defended Henri, a man she obviously dislikes. Her attention to detail is reliable because of her background and occupation, and she swears Henri did not have the opportunity to poison the victim. Last, I interviewed the comedian, Mr. Sheldon, which I'm sure is some sort of stage name and places him under suspicion for that alone. He accused Henri regarding a money issue for some gambling that apparently goes on during the voyage. A great deal of money, as I understand, that Henri owed Mr. Sheldon. Sheldon defended Tabitha clearly because of their relationship, so that defense is suspect. So two of the people with the best motive, Sheldon and Tabitha, had the least opportunity or knowledge of how to commit the act. Abigail had the opportunity and knowledge but no motive. Gorgon sighed. Henri did it. He shook his head. I just don't believe it. And you should not, because he didn't commit the murder, I said. Why not Henri? Dr. Winsec asked. Abigail made it clear that while he prepared the drinks, others had access to them. And while Henri is no savant by any stretch of the imagination, he would have to be an idiot to kill the man in such a way. He would be the primary suspect. His job would be on the line at the very least. Others knew of the money issues between them. Crimes of passion sometimes rob people of their intelligence, what little they may have, but this was not a crime of passion. It took thinking and forethought. An odorless, tasteless poison, one that would not have caused suspicion in the victim, is not so easy to acquire. Gorgon groaned. I thought you said you knew who did it. I do. Then who? He said. There's one person we have not considered, I said. Dr. Winsec raised a brow. Who? I closed my notepad. Aaron Betts, the victim himself. He took his own life. What? Gorgon said. Suicide? Why? Aaron Betts was a miserable person, I said. Most hecklers are. He was known to drink heavily. He was on a cruise, alone. He had conflicts with most of the people at the table. But why this way? The doctor asked. He could have shot himself, hung himself, dove off the ship. Being a heckler tells us much about his character, I continued. He felt alone. He wanted attention, as his gregarious behavior shows, and is a classic mask for his own insecurity and loneliness. He was in his 40s, a common time for many suicides among men, feeling a wasted life, as one isn't where they thought they would be, and as a man, his choice of death was violent. He could have easily found a poison with the desired effect, and it would not have needed to be tasteless or odorless, necessarily, since he put it in his drink himself. Additionally, an added benefit would be to create suspicion in the others, Henri and the comedian specifically. Gorgon's mouth hung open, and it snapped shut before he spoke. You're sure? You're saying the man killed himself? That is the conclusion I have come to, yes, I said. It is the simplest conclusion. While many television shows and movies like to make things complicated and far-fetched for dramatic effect, if you've been with real-world investigations, you realize that more often than not, the simplest conclusion is the correct one. Dr. Winsec stared at me, her arms crossed. I suspect that if you search Mr. Betts' room, I said, you will find whatever poison he used, and possibly other evidence to support my conclusion. None of the suspects are going anywhere over the next couple days. If I am wrong, then you will have the opportunity to arrest or contain a person if more evidence becomes available. Gorgon blew a sigh that mixed awe and relief. Well, wow. Thank you for your time, Dr. Wolf, and your help. We'll check back in with you after we've done some more investigation as you suggested. I smiled and nodded at him. You're welcome, I said, glad to be of help. Gorgon smiled back, shook my hand, and left. Dr. Deb Winsec stayed behind, however. She uncrossed her arms, and her lips made a line on her face. Can I help you with something else, Doctor? I said. Dr. Winsec frowned. It was you, wasn't it? My head tilted just a bit. I'm sorry, what did you say? You heard me, she said. It was you. You killed that man. I chuckled. You think I am the killer? Her mouth twisted in thought. While you were here interviewing these people, I was also asking questions. Not as formal as you, of course. I'm just a cruise doctor, but still I asked questions. I stood there and waited while she paused. You were sitting at the bar, she began. Everyone saw you. That gave you opportunity. Why were you at a comedy show late at night? An educated man who seems to despise the comedian and his jokes? I couldn't sleep, I said, and I wanted a drink before bed. There are a dozen places to sit and get a drink on this ship. Why here, she said. And you keep talking about how it took planning and education. and attention to detail to pull off such a murder more than most people here would have had. You mentioned a tasteless, odorless poison. That would have taken planning beyond tonight. No one would have had access to such a poison here on the ship. They might sell weed or bring other drugs, but no one deals in poisons on a cruise. That would have been brought in, snuck in somehow by the killer. For a reason, for a purpose. And each one of the supposed suspects recognized you. You've been around on the ship. I got the feeling they felt watched, like you were sizing them up. You mentioned how much you could tell about people and personal situations. Maybe you picked up on their conflicts, on their prejudices to each other, their connections you could exploit. I took a deep breath. Why would I do that? What motive would I have? I have no beef or conflict with the deceased, unlike the other suspects in the room. Dr. Winsec pulled out her phone. As you said in our first conversation, you are an expert in the criminal mind. You've done dissertations on it. She raised her phone to her face. And you've published several papers on criminal investigation and how easy it is to accuse and find someone guilty who is innocent. You know, people like cops without the psychological training you've had. She showed me her phone and waved it at me. Google. It's pretty nice. You're saying I killed this man for what? For research? She said. For kicks? I don't know. But as you said, it is the simplest conclusion. Scoffing, I shook my head. That's a clever hypothesis, Doctor. I must say, very convoluted and dramatic. There's no evidence, however, but you should send that into a publisher or something for a very interesting mystery novel. Dr. Winsec shrugged. I might. She half turned to go and then paused. Just so you know, while you were interviewing people here, I had all of your rooms searched on the ship, all 6 of them. You know, for any of that physical evidence that you mentioned earlier, especially stuff that could be poison. Maybe I'll find something. Maybe I won't. She grinned at me. Have a good night, Dr. Wolf. As you said, you won't be getting off the ship anytime soon, so we'll see each other again, I'm sure. I stood still and watched Dr. Winsec walk away. Holding my notepad in one hand and my copy of Peoples and Plagues in the other, I began to wonder if there was a way to get off of a cruise without anyone noticing.
Great job, Britt, with the story. I really like the way that it ended and wrapped up there. So it kind of leaves it a mystery at the end, but I think you guys get what happened there. And if you don't, we will be going into another flash fiction season. This won't be a competition, though. This will be a exploration of the characters from this story, The Midnight Showing. So the genre is going to be pretty much mystery all the way through, but we're going to give you guys opportunity to vote on what titles you would like us to write from. So we're going to give you 3 titles tonight, which you can vote for, and then that will be the first story to be written, and we'll draw a name of who's going to write next. So the first title could be Doubt Kills. The second title could be One Too Many. And the third is titled The House Must Always Win. So those are your 3 options. Doubt Kills, One Too Many, or The House Must Always Win. Vote on those, and then we will write from one of our characters' point of view under that title. This voting is going to be found on our Facebook page. So do go to our Facebook page. There's a group you can join, and there's a page you can join as well. Both links will be on there. And like she was saying, leave us comments. Vote on who you would like to hear from next. But yeah, so we had fun doing this. Hopefully you guys, our faithful listeners, enjoyed listening through it. And as always, remember to raise the glass to inspiration. And make sure you go and find us on all of our social media. We'll see you next time. Peace out.